All right, hey buddy, we're back for more. Ready to jump into it.
We are. It is March 23rd. The year is 2023. Welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron podcast, episode 670.
Wow, 670
right there. Woo. Yeah, big number.
Big number.
And big props to everyone who is here at our Texas camp. It is sunshiny and toasty. I may be coming back with the logo, a new Crushing Iron podcast logo. For those of you that don't know, the logo of our beloved podcast, one of the top 7 million podcasts in the world, mind you. The logo for that is Mike's burnt back from what I believe was New Orleans 70.3. The April, what was that? So April, how was it? April, it used to be an April race. I had just gotten sober for maybe 2 months. So it was, so it was what, 2012?
No.
13, 14?
I think it was 14.
14?
I think it's 14, yeah. Yeah,
you're right. Yep, 14.
I drove from Nashville to do that race, came back, worked for 3 days, and then drove back to Dallas for the Final Four. Or no, the Final Four was before it. So I went to the Final Four. That's right, because I remember, oh boy, you go to the Final Four and it's just a party. That was like a week before my 70.3. So I was talking to my boss. I'm like, hey, I'm going to the Final Four. Is it cool if I just stay there and go to, he's like, we need you here. So I had to go back for 3 days.
Right, because you're trying not to sell them the Final Four experience. Yeah, I got to go to Dallas, go to the Final Four, and then I come back and I got a race. It just so happens to be in New Orleans.
Yeah,
and he's probably like, dude, shit. Like he's like, ride a triathlon in New Orleans. Okay, got it. Yeah, but you got.
Yeah, well, he hated my triathlon life anyway because he.
Oh really?
Oh yeah, that was another big part of that whole experience for me was that. I worked at that news station. Nobody was even into it. And it felt like it was just like, whatever. But anyway, so I had to, I'm at the Final Four and I remember training, quote unquote. I was running out in the courtyard of the Lowe's Anatole in Dallas after 12-hour nights, man, of just ripping it up. And, I remember running out in the stupid courtyard, like 20 laps. And I'm like, I think I'm ready. That was just terrible. And then I'd drive back to New Orleans. And it was just like we talked about in the last podcast, you going to Texas. I went from, whatever weather it was into the mid 80s. And it was, like within a week, I didn't have any heat training and I just got absolutely fried at that thing. And that became the picture, I guess.
Yeah, that's back then when they had this race and then they switched to it, it had the most the weirdest layout for a swim. It was like the shape of an M, real tough swim. I think that was a race you were lined up with my boy Denim Rick McElroy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you guys ran each other in line. And then I remember your mom texted me and asking me on the bike, what's wrong with you? I believe if memory serves, wasn't your brake rubbing the entire time?
Yeah, well, it was just, my front brake was loose, and I was just so new to the sport. I had no idea even how to deal with that. It was on the track, and if you turn the wheel and look up underneath it, that's how you tighten it. I had the tool. I couldn't figure. I was trying to I was trying to cut my front brakes off because they just kept rubbing the whole time. And you know that enough. You did that one, right? So windy.
So windy and so bumpy. Like the year I did it, I think it was 2 years before you did. It's windy and bumpy. I went over the first little overpass and it's so bumpy. I came down and I had just bought these brand new, the company called 3T, these carbon extension aero bars and with pads. Clunk, lost my aero pad.
Oh,
on
man.
at like mile 3. So I went like horns and then like one arm like the whole way. I actually ended up having a pretty decent race that day, but the swim was canceled. It was a duathlon, not my thing. Yeah, it was interesting little area, but it sounds like the Trek had been shoved in the back of your Beamer one too many times, and the brakes the brakes got off kilter, kind of like the beginning of this podcast got off kilter. But we'll try to get back on track. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. Time is very valuable. We appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as human beings on this planet, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. We also talk a lot about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level triathletes looking at the very first 5K or sprint triathlon, all the way up to elite level amateurs trying to get back to world championships, and everyone in between from all over the globe. And we'll use the feedback loop we have with them and training peaks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion today. We also hop into our oftentimes lively Facebook group. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Answer multiple questions. We'll let you right in. Awesome people, fantastic community, solid resource in a sport that can be overcomplicated at times, and just a lot going on. And now that racing season is here, get feedback on the places you're going, what you're doing, best hotels, best places to visit when you're there, recommendations on races, experiences, everything. It's a solid group, and they really do give a lot of good advice. There's no such thing as a stupid question in there, unless you haven't watched Seinfeld, and then I retract my previous statement. But
Exactly.
we go in there and watch Seinfeld. I mean, I don't understand. I actually had an athlete. I feel like we make a lot of differences on this podcast. They might not be grand. We might not make people money. We might, just help their happy and healthy triathlon journey, which is our agenda. But it warms my heart when I read an athlete in Training Peaks and they say, started episode 1 of Seinfeld today. I really feel like that's our way of changing the world, one athlete at a time, one listener at a time, one person at a time. If you could all just, detach from the desperate housewives of, whatever city you're watching, or trash Bachelorette, and watch Seinfeld, I'm telling you, the world would be in a much better spot than it is right now. So do your part, start Seinfeld, or go back and watch the reruns, and you'll thank us for it.
Yeah, it's so much easier to sleep after watching that than the Desperate Housewives thing.
You're so right.
It's just fun. I mean, it's like, it's just the smallest little quirkiness, man, that just kind of, you just chuckle and then you go to bed.
Yeah, it
You don't
makes
have to worry about life's problems anymore.
Yeah, it makes you feel relaxed. It's like, people are like, well, I love watching that trash. It's my guilty pleasure. My guilty pleasure is a piece of chocolate before I go to sleep. That's my guilty pleasure. Like, so find something else.
Move.
Again, Seinfeld, it's a great start. If you haven't watched movies like The Office, that's another great, just take care of yourself. And the Seinfeld is a great spot to take care of yourself and be more in tune with the inside jokes of the podcast. Because listen, we got a couple more years to go for this before we hit 1,000. So a lot of more Seinfeld references. But today's biggest reference will be to finish up the conversation we started earlier this week about being objective when it comes to analyzing your race performance. Again, I think performance is a word that's used over and over and over again in elite sport and amateur sport. And, when everyone hears performance, they hear and they see and they create in their minds these numbers and algorithms and expectations and data points. And that's what we use to measure, right? Everybody talks about measurement, and comparison. And the thing that you can do is go race to race. And that's what we do. And we also can't go from what your expectations were to, what happened on the day. And we talked a little bit about just the approach to the race, coach's view of how an athlete did. And the most important thing being what the athlete's experience was. What was your experience, right? We all have different experiences. You could ask two people who played the same game. Did you like that? One will say, yeah, it was awesome. Will say, nah, I thought it was terrible, right? Same game, different experience. Right? And that's the world in general, right? We all have our own reality. And it's really important as you go into racing season. And again, like I didn't touch on this too much in the previous one, but I'll mention it now before we talk about the bike. But to be objective when you go into these races and ask yourself, did I get this? The expectation that I have now when I signed up for this race, I had also an expectation of the training that I would do to get this expectation and this result. And the next question should be, did I do what was required to make this expectation a realistic or a pipe dream? And ask yourself, right? It's one of those things as a coach, I had this discussion via text message and like our intermission earlier. And then in Training Peaks, an athlete it's got a sign up for a full marathon. It's their quote unquote B race, right? And it's in 3 weeks. And, they said, hey, I felt pretty good on my long run this last weekend, but, I got my marathon coming up. I'm just having a hard time, with the long runs we're doing, because I'm doing it. And I said, no, that's fine. I said, but, you just screwed your toe up, almost broke it. So you missed 2 weeks of long runs. You got really, really sick 3 times in the last 4 months. So we've missed a ton of long runs. And I just had to say, listen, I understand that you're beers, understand doing it, and we'll do it, and you can do it. But my job, my responsibility as a coach is to take you from where you are week to week, not where you want to be and not where you thought you'd be. I want you to hear that again. The job of a coach is to take you, from where you are week to week, not where you want to be and not where you thought you'd be, because taking you from where you are is the real part. It's where you actually are. It's not built on what you should have done or what was scheduled last week or what you hoped you could do when you started the training block or what you imagined yourself being able to do leading into the race. You can do the marathon, you can do it once, right? We've proven that time and time and again with our athletes on the podcast that you just got to do it one time. You don't have to overrun yourself. But the most important thing is keeping yourself healthy and keeping yourself on a right trajectory. And so I say all that to segue into that, the objective thought process of an athlete is, I think I even mentioned this, one of my kind of race recaps the year in Ohio 2 years ago when I was like, yeah, I really didn't put in the work that I wanted to get a better result. I had a low 440. I was hoping to be in the 430s, but the big word there is hope. I was hoping. If I knew deep down in my heart I hadn't swam enough. Don't get me wrong. It felt good not to swim as much because I rode a ton. I ran a ton. I was in pretty good shape, but I was lying to myself about the impact it would have on my race. And so when I got done, I put forth a great effort. I went to the well in the run. I really buried myself. I still had, a decent day, and on, upon further review, I was even happier because once I asked, did you put in the work to get the result you wanted? The answer was no. The answer was no. And I think that's a hard question for athletes to ask themselves because we become too hard on ourselves and we don't like that because we feel like it's, a negative, and it opens up different thought processes, and it might make us approach the race differently. And that's what it should do, is you approach the race differently or light a fire under you for the next race. And I had an athlete say that over the weekend. Hey, that half marathon, I'm happy with it. A lot of people would love to have this time. I wish I could do this, but frankly, I haven't put the work in. Beautiful. But, you acknowledge you hadn't put the work in. You still showed appreciation and you lit the fire to do better next time. And so always go into your race with that. And, last podcast talked about going into the race, things that you have to overcome. We talked about specifically the swim, and then I mentioned the bike conversation, and the bike is the one where, outside of the glance at the watch getting out of the water, the bike is where you see people, in my opinion, ruin their race and make any statistics or data or metrics you want to use to run almost irrelevant, because athletes will say, hey, I think I want to hold 21 miles an hour for this one. Mm-hmm. And my first thought is worst idea ever, to try to hold a miles per hour on a course because a variety of things happen. Like, so, I was using the topic of this athlete did Puerto Rico. I didn't know how I saw the bike split. The first thing I had to do was, do the whole kilometers, the miles per hour thing. I'm like, this is not what I'm made for. Like, I just need like point blank, like what's the miles per hour here? I'm like, I see 40 kilometers. I'm like, dude, we are flying. And then I go back into the conversion. I'm like, all right, this is pretty solid. But it was a little bit slower than what I'm used to with this athlete doing. And then you go back and look at the weather and you look at, 18 to 25 mile an hour winds. It was 3 loops. And then the biggest thing was that it was not only hot, but the roads were terrible. Mm-hmm. That impacts your cycling 100%. This athlete was their first time riding outside, right? They lived in Colorado the entire year. And they will say, like, it's a plan of a public service announcement, if you've ever done Kona or you want to go or you're qualified to go and you want a good test event, Puerto Rico 70.3 is your thing. Humid, hot, windy, it's perfect, and hilly. And so the biggest thing you can do and the biggest favor you can do yourself is to not go by miles per hour, because you are destined to do one of two things. You're destined to implode halfway through because you're chasing a miles per hour. Mm-hmm. Or even worse, number 2, you're going to overshoot that and try to bank time and end up hurting yourself even earlier, right? And I guess the third one would be you're doing a race like most races where you do headwind one way, tailwind the other, or you're in a headwind long enough to make the turnaround and then it's no tailwind, it's just no wind, so you don't get any time back, and it's just mentally demoralizing. I tell every single athlete that I work with, I say, don't ever, under any circumstance, have average miles per hour on your screen. Ever. Period. It's useless.
I wish I had heard that before.
Yeah, it's a useless number to have on your screen. It's useless because all it's going to tell you is either you're going this fast, you're going this slow, but it's just the output. You need to know what your heart rate is, what your effort's like, because everybody, whether you believe it or not, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, it messes with your mind. It messes with your mind. If it messes with your mind, it messes with your game plan. And if it messes with your game plan, it messes with your ability to execute that game plan. Never have miles per hour on your bike computer under any circumstance. You're welcome.
I'm just laughing because I tend to do that. And what you said there about that though is absolutely true. And when I'm in my best headspace, even if I do a lot of times I don't have it up, but I'll like pop in there every once in a while for a little check-in to see. And when I'm in what?
Did you check in Wisconsin?
Which one? This year?
Yeah.
Through about mile 40.
Oof.
Actually, I felt pretty good through mile 40, but my average miles per hour wasn't telling me that. It was really, honestly, like, I'm glad you said that again, because I really do need to listen to that, because well, part of it is because I've done that race so many times. I kind of have, right, a confidence level that I can be around a certain number. But last year, man, it was demoralizing because it just kept creeping down. And if I'm in a good place, I will start, and this way, I don't race with power, and I know that's probably not everybody's bag and whatever. it's just not my thing. But when I'm in a good place, I aim low coming out, and I mean, because it's so rare in a race when you can kind of like build on it. You know what I mean? It's always, like you said, it's kind of like trying to bank time and hold on. And I tell people, even with power, that's a similar thing, because if you come out of gate and trying to hold whatever 180 for the race, and you're at 180 at mile 40, that's good. And then you kind of creep it up or what, I don't know. I just think it's always better to finish strong, no matter what it is. I mean, or at least mentally think that way, because there's like last year, there's nothing worse than seeing that miles per hour just go down and down and down. And I still would have, like, get done with that second loop, and you still got the stick, and it's 20 some miles or whatever back to the helix, and man, it was one of those, I almost threw the computer off the bike because I was like, I can't look at this anymore. It's just not happening. It wasn't happening, and it was so deflating. But again, we ended the last podcast. I might as well put that in there now. My first ever Wisconsin, when I got out of that water and I had to shift my overall game plan because the swim was too slow for my A goal. And then I got out on the bike, and then my derailleur was screwed up. So I kept throwing my chain when I'd go to the big gear. And it happened maybe like 3 times. And of course, I'm not a mechanical person. So I just made the decision after probably like 10 miles that I was in my little ring for the whole ride. Mm-hmm. And talk about one course that you can kind of get away with that on. But again, when I recalibrated out of the swim and I knew that my overall goal was gone and I said it saved my race, I also think throwing the chain might have saved my race too, because I knew what I would probably try to do on that bike, and not having my big ring wouldn't let me. And so I would, spin up these hills and I would do the best I could to get my momentum going, and I would be, just coasted down like every hill. And a lot of people actually say that at Wisconsin, just recover down. There's so many hills and they're so speed friendly that you don't really need to hammer them a lot of times. And that's what I did. And I think it just saved my race. Just being able to not, overdo it. And I know I would have, most likely. I would have probably, get in the big gear and mash it, But it was just, I still find that fascinating, because I think that was my second favorite, fastest bike up there. But I was still under 6 hours in the little ring. It's just a weird concept to think about when you can't really, get after it, really. You just kind of like being steady and getting a lot of recovery. And I think really what it did the most was it saved that run, Mm-hmm. I was beat up enough getting off that bike, but I can't imagine, like last year, I could barely walk into transition after that ride. It was unbelievable. There's a lot of other factors, but.
Right. Which, you said it, it's a bunch of other factors. Mm-hmm. It's, when you look at your race split, or you look at comparing, again, like not against the field, but just yourself, because you could, even on the same course, you could go out and put out less power, have a higher heart rate, right? So you're, detrained in comparison, and have a faster bike split with perfect conditions, versus having really tough conditions, lots of wind, right? Maybe it's super hot, the dew point's super high, and your watts are higher and your heart rate's lower, so you're in better shape, but your time is slower. There's mm-hmm. so many things that go into that, and that's why overall time is something you just can't ever obsess about. You have to obsess about your effort and the execution. And I love what the story about your, not being able to get in the big ring. It was the governor you didn't know you needed that you got. Exactly. So your max effort in your small ring wasn't a 10, it was like a 6. Versus if you're in your big ring, going up it, and you go to a 9 or a 10, you start to produce, lactic acid, and then it's like then your day starts to have problems. And it's very hard. And that's why, again, we talked about it a lot, and we can segue there now, is that, most people's runs are ruined on their ride. Like there honestly is very, very, very little. And I've had personal experiences with this with athletes that I'll tell them, like, so, what do you think about it? I'm like, dude, you biked 30 watts over what we recommended. Why are you asking me why you blew up? Like, that's why you blew up. Like, it's point blank. I was listening to another coach talk on a podcast on the ride home 2 days ago from Nashville, and he's like, yeah, I was talking to this athlete that was, it's a professional athlete in Kona who's won it before, and they went through this like 1 hour, 2 hour debrief on, hey, we know you can run better. Hey, we know you can do this. Like, maybe we'll change this up. And then towards the end of the call, the athlete says, yeah, well, and I also didn't finish half my gels. Mm-hmm. And he goes, okay, well, now we have to start this conversation all the way over again, because now it's a different resolution. And that's because they were underfueled. They didn't have enough carbohydrate. They didn't take in everything they were supposed to. So of course you can't have the energy to do what's required. Even though you have the ability, you have to have the energy, and you have to have fuel to fuel that energy. And that's the biggest disconnect with athletes in their approach, in their assessment of their run splits. And that's why so many, debriefs and dissections of run splits are futile and a waste of time, because all you really need, because I always start back at the beginning. How much did you swim? I didn't swim very much. I mean, again, my perfect examples, 2 years ago, Ohio, I was toast coming out of the water, toast. So I started the race right on the bike in a significant energy depleted state. I mean, there was parts of the bike where I was like, this feels awful. And I couldn't help but get mad at myself because I've done the race before, so I knew where I was. And I was like, oh, remember how fun it was 2 years ago when you crushed this and you felt awesome? I was like, yeah, you swam 3 days a week, 4 days a week, so you were in better shape. It all starts in the front, right? It all starts in the time you start to take withdrawals from your energy bank the moment you get in the water. And it's how much energy is being lost, and by how fast you're going is where you get on the run. And so when you look at your run split and you look at, effort and execution, and that's why effort is such a huge piece. And we never have athletes run by pace. It's always by effort, unless we give them like that, the governor, the first 3 or 4 rounds, like, don't run under this. And even then, most of them run under it. They don't give a shit. They're happy to be off the bike. They're like, hey, here we go. The crowd's pumped, energy's brewing. Like, let's just rock this. And then reality sets in. They're like, man, I got swept up too quick. Because compared to the bike ride, the run seams were short, right? 112 miles versus, the marathon, but it's not. I mean, honestly, if you look at most middle to back of the pack athletes, your run takes you longer than your bike. And that's always something I bring up with athletes when we talk about fitness and energy, is what is your run split relative to your bike split? Are you putting out a 6.5 hour bike split? Pretty solid, average, middle of the pack. What's your run split? Is it also 5.5, 6 hours? Something's got to give, right? Because they should not be equal. Different energy, different demands, different load, but those should not be equal. And so when you go from, you get off the bike and you're assessing, and everyone wants to run by pace, but the biggest thing is, same thing what goes with training. You never know how you're going to feel. You might get off the bike and you might feel amazing. Also doesn't mean go smash it. If you got the bike feeling terrible, also doesn't mean crush it, right? Smoke it. But you go back to analyzing the performance, and this athlete that I was mentioning in Puerto Rico, solid run splits, ran strong. Again, you look at the weather compared to where they've been, 85 degrees versus, close to Denver, Colorado, nothing even close, hard bike, hard swim, energy's gone. You have to expect the slower split. It's not that they ran bad. It's that if you look at the way every athlete approaches a race, is that there are certain periods of the race where more energy is required and demanded, whether you plan on it or not. Right? There was, the races. I remember doing the first time I ever did Muncie 70.3, like 13 years ago. The run was advertised as flat. And let me just tell you right now, that's some bullshit. The run course is not flat. It is gnarly. It is up and it is down. And now that they moved it back to whatever, September, October, to make it softer, it used to be in July. So it was humid. It was gross. It was nasty. And, but as an athlete, again, I didn't go ride the course or whatever. I went and had this bike. I was flying that day. I remember having a really, really good day. Swam great. I biked real fast. And then, of course, immediately, what I had in my mind?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I think I can run this. I think I can go sub this. I get, I'm pushing a little bit more on the bike because I'm like, hey, the run's flat. I think I'm in this pace. And then you get to the run and you look up ahead and there's that long straightaway of just like rollers. And you think to yourself, shit, I should have saved some energy because I'm about to need it, but I didn't think I was going to need it. So now I'm screwed. So now I got to use it. And the pace I thought I was going to run is now going to be, now I'm going to start bleeding a little bit of time because again, you only have a certain amount of energy to go at the speed and to get the most out of your fitness. Everything after that is your bleeding time and it's not because you own the fitness. It's because you already had too many withdrawals. Now once you hit that overdraft spot, right? You get your money out, but you get the overdraft fee, and now you're paying the piper. And that's what the run is for most people. And it all starts from the swim and then the bike. But if you're well trained in both, and you get off and you run, it's no different, right? It's what were the conditions like? Did you nail your fueling on the bike? Everyone blames the run because it's last. And the reason they do that is because it's last is, one, you've already had all day to screw things up, right? You had all day long to probably swim out of your fitness level, to screw up your nutrition on the bike, right? And not take in enough fluids, and also probably overbike. You had a chance to do all those. Then you get to the run and people, I just got to run more. Got to do more speed work. I'm like, fuck out of here with that. Like, no, you need to learn how to pace yourself. Like, you need to learn how to execute. And it's really, really, really hard to do. But when you can execute one well, and you finally do it, then it's all worth it, because every race after that changes. And again, it goes back to effort and execution and what was the day like, and was I passing people? Did I feel good? Did I hold up longer? Right? Did I run longer than I ever had before I had to walk? Did I feel better? Was my heart rate lower? Did I feel like I nailed my nutrition? All these things have to be taken into account. Again, even when you're comparing the same race in the same weekend every year, it could be 80, it could be 60. I mean, Chattanooga is the best example, right? Early season May, late season September. It could be 60 and beautiful, or it could be 100 and hot as hell. And that's why it's impossible to compare, because the conditions and the demands, they've had the swim canceled one year, they had it shortened one year, it's been wet's illegal, it's been not been wet's illegal, 116 miles. The run's always what it is. It's just brutal. It's just the energy demands of the day are what dictate the effort and the outcome. And that's why getting so tied up in pace, or even heart rate, right? Measuring your heart rate and it's telling you to slow down even though you feel incredible. You got to go with your gut and go with the flow. And that's exactly how you should judge yourself at the end of the day, at the end of the race, when you tally them all up together, is did I execute my plan? If you answer to yes that every time, then you're going to have a great race anyway, or the best race you were capable. Let me rephrase. If you execute your race plan to a T, then the answer will always be yes when you ask yourself, did I get the most out of myself today? Yes. Now, you might not like the answer, right? The conditions might be terrible. You might have, gotten 3 hours of sleep and had some, bad food or whatever, and it might not have been your day, right? Because the world doesn't give a shit. It's race day. It just like training. You wake up some days, you feel incredible. You wake up some days, you feel awful. Say you don't get a special pass, right, for race day. But if you can say that, and then you can also tell yourself, yeah, I gave it hell today. I really did. I gave it hell today. Then you have you will leave with the most important thing, and that is you'll be proud of yourself. You'll be proud of your effort. Everything else after that, the time, if it's a PR, it's not a PR. If it's a course PR, not a PR. If it's a slow time or a fast time, if it's an age group podium, or it's a top 30% or whatever it is, all that stuff is extra, right? It's just the sprinkles on top, right? It's not what you should leave and be proud of. It should be proud of the effort. And again, some athletes go back and, when they talk about the races they wish they could get back, it's never about the ones they're like, yeah, I wish I could get that race back where I got fifth and I want to get fourth. The races everybody wants to get back, myself included, are the ones where they question whether they really, really, really went to the well. Regardless of time, did they really empty the tank? Because emptying the tank leaves everybody proud, regardless. Now, preferably empty that tank within 5K of the finish line. Right. If you empty the tank if you empty that tank on the bike, not whatever. I'm sure there's a positive take from it, not a lot, but yeah, like if you empty the tank and you finish, you feel like you did everything you possibly could have, right? and you took the day and you owned it and you took what it gave you, then you should be proud. But it's all the other stuff people get wrapped up in that starts to diminish the incredible accomplishment that everyone should feel when they complete a race of any distance.
Yeah. And it's really hard, man. We're not immune to what we're talking about. And when I hear you say stuff like you didn't train hard enough for the swim, it just really kind of tickles me because I know that that's your jam, right? And you know that you just can't hold back. You know what I mean? I'm that way on the bike. I feel like if I don't train enough on the bike, I still got it, you know? And I think that I love what you said about, you start draining the energy reserves in the swim, and a lot of people don't pay attention to that. But to hear you say that, sometimes you overswam your training and come out like, not shelled. I think I can make that analogy on the bike. I usually come out of the water a little bit shelled, and then I find myself trying to make up a little bit on the bike. And it really does. I've done that so many times that I won't acknowledge that it's probably hurt my run. And sometimes I haven't done it and I've ran really well. And we have to keep that in mind. I mean, and you're right. It's just like how many times you say, giving up a few minutes on the bike is worth it because you'll get it back on the run times 2. But how many people really have that patience and, the ability, because you're on the bike and you're just ready to go and you want to kind of lay it down. You feel pretty good because you're not pounding in your legs. And it's usually not my legs that feel it. It's the body. A lot of times it's, my upper body, which starts in the swim. So it's like a weird thing, right? And then you get on the run and you wonder why you don't have it all the way through. And I'm so glad you said that because, empty the tank, but not, in the beginning of the bike or even at the end of the bike. It doesn't matter at that point until you can kind of put all those pieces of the puzzle together, because it's really, when you nail it, and like you said, it feels so good when you know that you can get to the point where you can empty the tank in a way that you want to empty it, not emptying it just because that you have no choice, just to kind of drag yourself to the finish line. But when you got a little bit left and you can kind of just still dig in there and not completely feel like you're stumbling home, but you still got it, but it's going to be all you got to get there. And then you're kind of seeing a little bit double and shit like that, but you still feel good about it.
Be proud of your preparation and be proud of your effort. I mean, those are the 2 biggest things you can take, in and on a race day, is to be proud of your preparation. And if you go in there and you're proud of that, regardless of if it's as much as you wanted to do, and we can leave it there, is that, you go into races and you can tell yourself that story, right? Like the guy you were sitting at the bar with, I think at the hotel before Chattanooga one year, and all he had was excuses already right before the race started. There's proud of your preparation because it went perfect, and then there's being proud of your preparation race because you put forth the effort you could given the life that you were given, right? Whether it's, because we're all given. And it's, life's all is just like, we use tons of analogies in life and racing and training and how it's all the same, right? Life's the same. You go into a race and your life is easy and you don't have a lot of responsibilities, and professional life is great. Your personal life's great. You're super healthy, and you're able to squeeze in, 13 hours a week, easy breezy. The next year you're like, all right, I did 13 last year. I want to do 14 or 15 this year. I'm going to take up the next level. Life hits you hard. Maybe you get injured. Maybe you get sick. Maybe you lose your job. Maybe you move across the country, and then you have these little, the devil on one shoulder. It's like, you didn't do enough, but you still got in. You still found the time and you made the time when you could. And even if that was 9 hours, 10 hours, 6 hours, if it was still your best, right? Don't compare the hours, right? Because I'd be willing to argue making the time, finding the time, getting the training in, you put in a hell of a lot more effort to get those 6 hours in than it was to get in those 13. And that's something to be proud of. And yeah, your expectations might be a little bit different from the race, but that's okay. Be proud of the preparation. Be proud of the effort you put in, and have those feelings cross your mind before you even step your toe in the water to race. Be proud of what you did. Be proud that you showed up, right? And that alone will take you far. But it all starts with the training and the preparation. You know, be proud of what you do. You know, talk to yourself kindly. You know, don't criticize yourself, because if you do that during training, you're doing it after the race. So then what the fuck do you do this for? Right? And everyone knows that person. They're never happy with their training. They're never happy with the race. AKA, you're never happy. And that's just no way to live. It's no way to train. It's no way to be a part of the sport. Be proud of yourself and the things that you do, and work hard and put forth the effort and execute in your training, execute in the race. If you can do that, everything else works itself out. The placements, the PRs, the podiums, whatever it is, the first time finishes, they all add up and they'll all come together as long as you can do those things. So again, be proud of your preparation, be proud of your effort, and remember, we're proud of you too. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Go to our website, C26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you want to support the podcast, because we don't do sponsors or ads, you can support us by going to the online hub, or excuse me, our website. Again, that's C26triathlon.com, and go to the online store and purchase some gear, purchase some swag. That's the best way to support us. You can also go to your favorite podcast platform and give us a solid review. That helps us as well. And if you need anything from Mike, he is available, CrushingIron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me, I'm at C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. Well, have a great time down there.
I will, man. I'll come back nice and crispy.
Yeah, get a little farmer stand going.
I will. I'm going to saddle up tonight, watch my boss take on FAU, and we'll see you next week.
All right, buddy. See you, man. See you.